Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank, coming to you virtually from Seattle in the Pacific Northwest. And as we do every first week of the month, we're even going down to the Bay Area to bring in our co-host. More on that in just a minute. Listen, if you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, this right here is the podcast for you. The podcast of record. We like to say this is where street smarts and book smarts, they collide. Hello, I'm Dan Whedon, and my co-host today is Linda Popke. Welcome, Linda. We'll come to you in just a minute. Our guest today is Moji Igun, and this is perfect timing, as you're going to find out, to have Moji on the show. Moji is an international keynote speaker and certified true zero waste advisor. Moji Igun founded Blue Daisi Consulting to help small businesses intertwine their desires to care for the planet and to have a successful business. We are really eager and excited to chat with Moji today. Welcome, Moji. We'll be with you in just a minute as well. Everybody else, listen, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and YouTube. You've all heard it before. Linda, what are we?
We are ubiquitous.
We're ubiquitous. We come to you from about a dozen cities, including the mothership in Atlanta. We're in Boston, Boca Raton, Charlotte. Charleston, South Carolina. Sorry about that, Charleston. We're all over the place, but we like when you listen to Seattle. Now, before we bring on Moji to get to learn more about her and her practice, hello, Linda. How are you?
I am great, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. The rain here has finally stopped. It's finally stopped. It's been raining, feels like nonstop, but we got a little bit of stoppage on here. Hey, listen, I wanted to bring up a topic with you, if it's okay. On Monday, I wrote a newsletter, and as you know, Linda, I like to play golf, right? And I'm a big fan of Rory McIlroy. Do you know who Rory is?
Oh, yeah. Okay,
so Rory, one of the top golfers in the world. He's won 4 major championships, 20 other events, and in fact, he just won a couple weeks ago. But I found it interesting what he said when he was interviewed. He had said that he had been working to try to make some improvements, some swing improvements, but he was doing them in an effort to kind of be like somebody else. There was a couple other golfers. He was liking what they were doing, and he got so caught up in that, he wasn't winning tournaments. And then he said, he finally acknowledged, he said, I just realized finally that I'm good enough. What I do is good enough. If I'm just focused on being me, that's good. And I thought, you know what, that thinking sometimes comes into the business world under what we term the imposter syndrome, where CEO and business owners sometimes try too hard to be somebody else because they don't think they're good enough. But in really almost all cases, we're good enough if we trust ourselves and trust our swing. And Linda, I know you work with a ton of business owners. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen with the imposter syndrome?
It's funny. The imposter syndrome is all over the place. It's in business owners. It's in people who work in businesses. It's in politics. It's artists. I've heard of celebrities who are multimillionaires who say, gee, every time I go out on stage, I feel like I'm not good enough. So it has nothing to do with how good you are. It's all in your head and your mindset. And what needs to happen is, unless you're, obviously, if you're doing air traffic control or you're a surgeon, you have to be as perfect as possible, because good enough is not good enough if the plane skids off the runway. Yeah. But for most of us, we are our own worst critics. Yeah. We're the worst boss we could ever have. And we need to let some of that go. We need to believe in ourselves.
Well, it's funny. It's funny, Linda, you and I both grew up in consulting under Alan Weiss. Yep. And Alan has often said that most consultants leave a boss for a worse boss. And that can be part of it is if we kind of get into that, we're not good enough. But, enough of this. I'd actually kind of like to bring Moji in on this and ask her a kind of a different question. Moji, you are in the whole zero waste, environmental, climate control, all of that. Are we as businesses in the United States, are we doing good enough when it comes to being more sustainable?
Yeah, so the short answer is no.
Okay.
And I don't mean that in an alarmist way or a pessimistic way, but there is definitely a lot of space for improvement and opportunity for growth in that space. And so it's no, but in the most positive, optimistic way possible.
So I guess my question is, we always have more to do, but sometimes with what's going on in climate change, I'm listening to Boris Johnson the other night, it's like the world is going to end today. And I feel like if it's that dire, maybe we should just go out and party. So how do we come back to we need to do some things, but we can actually make a difference. What do you tell people to kind of talk them off the cliff?
Yeah, so climate change is overwhelming. I think that from every news headline, from every conversation that we have about this topic, it's always the end of the world, things are bad, it's not getting better, and we should probably do something about that, which is absolutely true. But at the same time, we have this very strange, unreasonable standard of perfection when it comes to sustainability in the first place, and that you have to get it right the first time or right away. And I think that there's so much space for experimentation and trying to figure it out as we go. And so I think I would say if you're kind of want to throw your hands up and just party, I think just think about what are the small things that you can do and just keep taking steps forward instead of getting overwhelmed by the enormity of the issue.
We can recycle our cups after the party.
Right. Start there. If that's where you start there.
So Moji, your practice is, and this, I'd like to dive into this. Your practice is helping businesses. We get a lot of information as individuals, as individual people. We see it all the time. Sometimes I wonder if businesses kind of get left out of the whole zero waste and environmentally conscious, especially small business. Talk a little bit about what you do, how you help businesses. Why would they bring you in? Do you work with all industries, all sizes? Talk a little bit about your business.
Yeah, so my business came from a personal problem that I was noticing, and I started exploring the zero waste lifestyle about 5 years ago. I learned about it through social media and trying to reduce your trash as much as possible. So I was doing that on an individual level. And what I was noticing after a few months of doing it was I was running into all of these roadblocks that I was trying to bring my own mug to the coffee shop, but they wouldn't allow it. Or I asked for no straw, but they gave me a straw. And I wanted to recycle, but there was no recycle bin. And so I was seeing all of these kind of issues that I was doing my best, but the systems and structures around me weren't set up for me to succeed. And so I realized that there needs to be some kind of support system for elevating those individual actions into more systemic and collective action. And so small business is kind of where I was able to kind of get my foot in the door because I have a lot of small business friends and I was able to just chat with them. And from that, realized that there needed to be some sort of support in that area. So I kind of had a problem and decided to solve my own problem with my business.
Great. So I know with a lot of things with business, we talk about reducing your waste, reducing your trash, reducing your carbon footprint. But I don't think reducing is going to get us where we need to go. So what advice do you have for small businesses on how to almost break the mold and think differently so that we don't create waste to start with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so that kind of talks about two different sides of what I do, which is waste diversion, which is what you're talking about, recycling properly, composting if you can, trying to do all those things correctly. But then there's the waste prevention, where it gets to why are we even creating this waste in the first place? Can we rethink our packaging or rethink the things that we set up in our businesses? And so there's the two sides of it. And I think those two things are always working together. And it's a really fun job for me. It forces you to be creative and think creatively about the solutions that are possible and how we can kind of go outside of the traditional solutions to find something different.
So Moji, I shared with you in the pre-podcast that my Rotary Club has really tackled this. We have a trashy task force, And we've got one of our events that is a zero waste or darn near zero waste, which when you're dealing with 400 people in an event is pretty good. But one of the things that I've learned most from the experience and from the person who's running it is about the single use. And as I was listening to you just now talking about, getting rid of things in the right way, one of the things that I ponder, and I wonder how you can help businesses with this, is the single use things are terrible. I mean, can we find different ways? You mentioned the coffee cup or the other items. What are some things that we both as individuals and businesses can do to get away from the single use packaging and find other ways to work with the things that we've gotten so used to? Example, water bottles, a single use water bottle, no bueno. What are some ideas that you have on that?
I mean, there's so many different solutions, and I think that it's difficult to give kind of blanket solutions because there are so many different factors that might affect what you're able to implement. But just some ideas are, if you're thinking about single-use water bottles, you could have just a water tank or a faucet that people can go fill up reusable cups and they can be washed and keep reusing those things over and over. If you want to think about food packaging that's either recyclable or compostable, can it be reusable? Can it be washable? Can you have some kind of return system? It takes things to a different level because you're forced to think about, actually, it's not just a quick fix, not a Band-Aid fix, but really reimagining how we do things. And it might be challenging to kind of give up some things or sacrifice some conveniences, but I think overall it's worth it to redesign for the future and have better outcome overall in terms of climate.
Linda, can I ask a really quick follow-up question on that? What would you say are maybe the top 2 or 3 worst offenders when it comes to that single packaging, where we should maybe just start the process with the lowest hanging fruit?
In most scenarios, I would say food packaging. So all of those snack wrappers, candy wrappers, we just had Halloween, all of that kind of stuff is wholly unnecessary. So if we're able to redesign that, that's one opportunity. And then to go along with that, food waste. A lot of our waste that is organic food should be composted, but a lot of it is even still edible and gets composted for no reason. So if we're able to think about how we can only take the food that we need, and if we don't need it, find ways to redistribute it within our communities or within people that are in organizations, doing that before sending it to the compost for the landfill. So I would start with food and food packaging.
Good to know. So I've got a question, because small business people are always dealing with regulations. I'm in California, so we have a whole set of rules at the state level about sustainability, but then we have the county and the city and the this and the that and industries. How do you kind of rationalize that as a small business person? Because you're trying to do the right thing, but you also need to make a profit. So how do you kind of tell people to handle that?
Yeah, it's a lot. And I think it all comes back to your values and your priorities. So, I mean, we run small businesses. I have a small business. I know what my to-do list looks like right now. There are a million things that come before thinking about what kind of water bottle am I going to purchase later today? Like, there's so many other things on your plate. But what I want for people and what I want us to move towards as a society is just interweaving sustainability into what we already do. So not being this extra side thing that feels like too much to implement or to think about, but really just part of our value system. So if you care about reducing waste as much as possible, make that consistent throughout your whole business model. If you care about alternative forms of energy, just make that consistent. And so it's not all of these things kind of attacking your business and overwhelming you, but it's really just part of what you do.
Hey, before we go to break, we've got about a minute before break ish. A thought popped into my head, Moji, as so many businesses have gone to a virtual workplace because of what's happened with the pandemic in the last 18 months. I mean, like flipped on a dime. So many people are not working in offices anymore. They're working out of their homes. In fact, we're probably all 3 of us coming from our homes. What changes has that had in when it comes to zero waste? And have you seen a noticeable change?
Absolutely. I think the biggest, most glaringly obvious one is thinking about what zero waste looks like in a business that's no longer a physical business, that everyone's reporting from home. And so the waste being generated by the business is largely people working in their own homes, in their own personal lives. And so I am excited about it because it really bridges that gap between your individual actions, what you can do on a day-to-day basis, and what the company values and does, and bringing those two things together in a seamless way. And so a lot of the work that I've been doing in the last year, because it's all been remote largely, is how do we get employees to understand zero waste and then infuse that into their jobs? And so if they're creating a product, how do you create that product that has better packaging, and all the other examples we've already talked about? So it's making that connection a lot more seamless than it was before, I think.
Well, Moji, thank you for that. We got to pay some bills now. We're going to take a short break to hear from today's spotlight sponsor. And when we come back with our guest, Moji Igun, for our Hot or Not section of the show, we're going to find out what Moji thinks about taking a little bit of a break in the afternoon. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Does this sound like you? I'd love to write a book, but I don't have the time. In fact, I'm not sure where to even start. Maybe you have a compelling story to share or valuable advice for clients and prospects. If only you could get that story out of your head and into a published format. Think you don't have time to write a book? Think you aren't a good enough writer to get your message across? Think this all sounds too overwhelming? Think again. At Leverage to Market Associates, we help aspiring authors transform that long-stuck book idea into an attractive published work. If you have written most of your book, we can help you edit your work and drive it through the production process. If you're not sure where to start, we'll coach you through the creative process to organize your thoughts and create a compelling book outline. And if you're just not comfortable writing a book yourself, we can ghostwrite for you. Contact Leverage to Market Associates for a complimentary evaluation of your nonfiction book concept today and bring your book to life.
Okay, we're back. Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm Linda Popke, and our guest today is Moji Igun with Blue Daisi Consulting, and our next segment is Hot or Not.
So, Moji, Linda and I are gonna pepper you with some questions regarding maybe climate, maybe environment, maybe business, maybe some personal things. Who knows? You're gonna tell us if it's hot or not, and why or why not. And at the end, I'm sorry you win absolutely nothing, but you'll have some fun, I hope. So I mentioned taking a break. Moji, hot or not? The power nap siesta. What do you think about that? Hot or not?
I say hot, and I think just take it a step further and just take a full-on nap. I love lounging in the middle of the day and taking breaks, and yeah, rest is a big thing for me. So absolutely hot.
And you know, my little birdie told me you think that probably as part it's good for creativity, isn't it? Is that one of the things that you think of when you do the power napping?
Taking space away from work and just resting and allowing things to process and marinate. Absolutely. So love a good nap.
Okay.
Okay, so related to that, daydreaming in terms of being creative, hot or not?
Absolutely hot. That's the low ball question. I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do is thinking about other ways things can work and getting creative. And so daydreaming is one of my favorite ways to do that.
All right. So this is kind of a hot or not pick one. Are you more of a chillpreneur or a hustlepreneur? Those are two new words that I've recently picked up. A chillpreneur or hustlepreneur. Which one is hotter?
I'm not sure I know the full definitions of both of those, but I would definitely identify more with chillpreneur. Definitely moving slowly, intentionally, not rushing or trying to get anywhere too fast. Just kind of taking my time with everything that I do.
All right.
Okay, so we got to talk about electric cars. I've got an electric car. We're talking about in California, no more gas fueled cars, brand new after 2030 or something. Are electrical vehicles hot or not?
I think they can be hot. I think they are hot for people who need a vehicle. So I used to have a gas powered car. It was a hybrid actually. But I got rid of it when I moved to Seattle because I didn't really need it. And so I think that if you need a car, and electric's definitely the way to go as we transition towards that. But if you don't need a car, you could also do that.
Good to know.
So let's talk a little bit more about your practice and the folks that you work with. Have you noted and how long have you been in business, Moji?
Going on 4 years now, starting my fourth year.
I've got to think that in the world of climate and zero waste and environmental, 4 years might seem like it was an eternity ago, that things have changed so much. Are you finding that small business, small and medium, especially business owners who may not have 500 employees, they might have 5 or they might have 50, are you finding that they are more making time for these kind of conversations than they were when you first got started? And why? And if so, why?
I think that's a layered question, because I think that it was definitely escalating for a while. When I first started, it felt like it was an explosion of interest, like a new wave into the green business space, which was wonderful. And then the pandemic hit, which completely shut things down for a minute. Everything had to focus towards just paying the bills, making profit, staying in business. And so I think that it's starting to infuse again, but I think people have a different mindset around it, where it's not the green business movement in that it's just another accolade to add, but really just, we want to shift the way that we do things in general. Let's think about zero waste in a more intentional way. So I think it's just changing the conversation, which I really enjoy.
So here's one for you, hot or not: government direction versus companies taking things and going on themselves and not waiting for Paris and Glasgow and all these other things.
I think it's both. I love seeing businesses who just, they decide this is where we're going, whether or not the government tells us to, whether the law tells us to, we're just doing it. That's amazing to see. But I also like to see the governments, local and international, making some kind of commitment to these global targets, because we can't do this just by city and company by company. We really need to work together on this. So I like to see both working together.
So this question is kind of a follow-up on that, and it may be a hard one to answer, but I want your opinion. Why is this not a bipartisan, full-on, and I know nothing, there's very few things that probably are, but I would think, you know, our planet, the place that we all live, the air that we all breathe, why is this so hard? And what are some things that whatever level of government could do immediately that would seem to be, again, that low-hanging fruit that could make such a difference? And before you answer that, I think about when we remember back in March of 2020, when we were like, nobody did anything for 2 weeks in March right away. And all of a sudden we saw all of these changes to the climate. It was fixing itself like instantaneously. And that was mind bending for me. What are some things, and that's a huge question, but what are some things that governments can do that would be helpful?
Yeah, so I'll go back to your first point about why isn't this a bipartisan issue? And well, I think it should be. And I also think it actually is. I think and again, you asked for my opinion. So I think what the problem is the language that we're using is very partisan. And so people who may lean left of center say things like climate change and changing the economy and reducing waste. And we use all of this language that we're using today. And I think that people who maybe don't agree with that say things like the economy and our future generations, but it all really does mean the same thing. And so I think if there's some way we can better communicate about how we're actually saying the exact same thing, we're just saying it in different ways, and come together that way, I think that might help. But again, this is a huge question that I can't answer by myself.
Is there any low-hanging fruit? I apologize, Linda. Is there, kind of the second part, is there something that you would say, this would be, if we did this, if somehow between the legislators, either a state or federal level or what are some things that could maybe make an immediate impact?
I'm not sure I have those answers. I think that's what we need to figure out. But I do see a lot of Republican-led policy that is actually climate policy, but they kind of frame it as an economy policy. And so they're kind of diverting materials away from the landfill to fuel an industry. And that is what we want to do. And so it's just the language and the framing that is kind of confusing and disjointed. So I think if we're able to communicate across party lines about what the actual goals are, it might see more success.
So I've got a question for you. I've been diligent for years in recycling and separating everything out and whatever. And then I hear that that recycling isn't really doing what it's supposed to. A lot of it winds up in landfills. A lot of it doesn't happen. So is it hot or not recycling? Should we do this? Is it making a difference? Or are we just kind of fooling ourselves?
Like all these are kind of in the middle. It's neither hot nor not. It's both. And I think that recycling is one solution if we do it well and we create good systems for it. So things like metal and paper, that recycling is working. What's not working is plastics recycling because of just the way that we are consuming way more than is necessary. And plastic actually can only be recycled really once or maybe twice. And so it's not really recycling, it's just kind of downcycling once or twice. But we want to move towards more reusables, better materials that can actually be recycled infinitely rather than just once or twice. And then recycling is actually a better solution. So it's combining solutions and actually getting the best solution for what we're actually trying to accomplish.
One of the things that I know just and today was recycling day of all things at my house. One of the things that becomes really hard to what Linda said is, and it's the plastics, you got to clean the plastic. It can't be contaminated. You've got to, and there seems to be, and I get it, I understand, but there seems to be that extra level of, oh, I wish I could just throw this into the recycling because it's plastic, but it's not the right kind of plastic. Do you think that from a technology standpoint, is there anything being done in the way that we're recycling the process? Is that improving?
Yeah, I think there's plenty being done, and I am not a plastic scientist, right. So I don't have all of the details, but I do see a lot of companies who are investing in technology where they can increase the recyclability of certain materials, that they're thinking about the end-to-end manufacturing process. So when they actually receive it back, it can be recycled as opposed to theoretically be recycled. So I'm seeing work being done there. But again, I think the overall goal is to reduce first and then recycle what's left. So it's a combination solution for sure.
Great. Wow. Lots of stuff for us to do. Let's go to something totally different. Hot or not, speaking multiple languages.
Oh, definitely hot. I can't. I'm only fluent in English and I speak a little bit of French and a little bit of Yoruba, which is my tribal language from Nigeria. But I wish I could speak fluently multiple languages at the drop of a hat. That's like a dream.
I know. Some of us seem to have a better ear for it than others. So
yeah,
great to hear that you're doing that.
I'm going to jump back on the hot or not. It's kind of hot or not, I guess, how we frame it. Street smarts or book smarts. It's nice to have both, but which one's hotter?
I think street smarts, I would say. I think book smarts are important. We need people who are very technical and understand how things work. But if you're not able to communicate about that and share it with other people and build things with that information, then it's not really helpful. So definitely street smarts.
Wow. So street smarts are better than, we need book smarts, but we need street smarts. How important is it to build personal relationships with clients? I mean, we know we all do that, but particularly in this world where things are changing and we have so much going on, hot or not?
Oh, definitely hot, definitely hot. I think that you should have some sort of personal, at least rapport with your clients. And also, I think that helps with acknowledging that we're all human in this work, especially with sustainability and climate change. It can feel very much like we have to get this right and do this process or get the certification, when it's really about people and relationships and kind of building a culture of care and sustainability. So definitely all about relationships.
Well, to add on to something you just said, hot or not, certifications like LEED certification and all those things, do they matter, or is it just a lot of process?
I think some of them matter. It depends on the certification. I think the key thing is, what did they actually have to do to get that certification? Because you can buy some certifications that don't really mean much. But if you actually had to make some substantial changes and are accountable to someone other than yourself, then I am for those kinds of certifications.
Well, before we hit break, one more question here, because you are an influencer on Instagram, is my understanding. So you know what, that's how the word gets out on a lot of this. From an entrepreneurial standpoint, what's your secret to maximizing your influence on a platform like Instagram? What can people learn from you?
Oh, that's a great question. I was not expecting that, because I don't know if I really have a handle on it, knowing what I'm doing. I think I just use Instagram as a way to talk about what I'm interested in, and it just naturally weaves its way into the work that I'm doing. So if people care about me and what I care about, then they'll naturally just care about the business and the work. So I think it just makes sense, but I'm not a marketing genius by any means. I just kind of do whatever on the internet.
Well, you're just being genuine. You're just talking. It's part about conversations, you know, and you're just talking there. Well, we've got to take a break from talking so we can learn a little bit more about our corporate sponsors who help us with this show. But don't walk away, because when we come back with our Plead the Fifth section with Moji Igun, we're going to find out how hard change is for some people when it comes to being more zero waste. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank. All right.
Plead the Fifth is
brought
there
she
to you
is.
by...
Okay. Sorry, Barb, go ahead.
Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors: Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, and the Kitsap Sun newspaper. Please visit our website at www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now back to the show.
Okay, well, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview, again, the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm co-host Linda Popke, and we are here today with Moji Igun of Blue Daisi, who is focused on helping businesses get to zero waste. And our next segment is Plead the Fifth.
And so, Moji, you get to plead the fifth only once. We hope you won't fair catch at all. We hope that you'll answer every single question. I teased it out a little bit about change, and we all know how hard change can be for some folks. But plead the fifth, when you're working with a small business to reduce their waste, to help them with that, what's the most common item that people do not want to give up, or the most common thing that they don't want to change?
Ooh, that's a difficult one, because I work with a lot of different types of businesses. And I think it's not that they don't want to give it up, it's that it's a little too challenging than what they're expecting at the moment. And so it's going to take a little bit of time or more money, or they'll have to retrain people, and it's just not worth it at that time. And so I think that that's usually the challenge that I run into.
Do you have one example, without, you don't have to name the business, but like an industry or something? Can you have one example of what you're talking about?
Yeah. So this business had a deal with a national retailer. And so their packaging is plastic packaging. And so one of my recommendations was to switch away from plastic and something more recyclable or reusable. And their concern was that since they're shipping nationwide, that the retailer itself has requirements on packaging size and durability, that it wasn't a smart decision for their business to change away from that. And so we stayed with that, but understanding that in the long term, that's the goal, is to continue to improve that material so that it's not so much plastic going across the country.
Great. So I got one for you. If we asked people who knew you, what would be the one thing that you could improve on? What would they tell us?
Myself, that I can improve on? Yeah. Oh, I think texting people back. I definitely struggle with that. So I have a lot of people I owe text to right now.
So, but hopefully they're all listening right now, and they know that you're going to get to them.
I promise I'll get back to you.
So one of the questions we've been asking people all year, all our guests, you may have heard us ask on recent podcasts, is, look, yeah, we're going to make you start a new business, and the new business is going to be based on a hobby. If you had to start a new business based on a hobby, what would that be?
Oh, something to do with cooking or gardening. I love to garden. I'm planting my garden right now. And so if it was making little pastries or cooking for people. That'd probably be it.
What comes out of your garden that goes into pastry? Now you've got me now, because I'm thinking pastry,
fruit, apples and berries and
yeah, berries. So strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, lavender for syrups. Like there's so many things.
I was thinking you might be going chocolate or something that you could. I don't know.
No. I wish.
Dan thinks like I do chocolate, one of the basic food groups. Okay, so let's stay on the idea of food. You're at a dinner party, you're seated next to someone you don't know. What's the first thing you say to them? And pass the salt is not an option, but what do you say to break the ice?
Well, I'd probably just ask how they know the host and start there, and what do we have in common, and just start there. Yeah.
So in 4 years, you've worked with a number of different companies on a number of different projects. And you don't have to name names, of course, but plead the fifth, Moji. What is the strangest, most unbelievable, wacky project that you've worked on?
Oh, I don't think I've had any wacky project, but I will share a funny story, which is one part of my job is to do something called a waste audit, or I dig through people's trash, I dump it out, I analyze it, I weigh everything. It's very hands-on in the trash. It's very raccoon-like. And so I did find a diaper in one of the trash cans and had to move it to the side and keep going. But it's not the most pleasant thing, but it's really fun to really get your hands dirty and understand what people are throwing away and why. So yeah.
Literally get your hands dirty.
Yes. Yeah, it's part of the job.
You know what? We can send you to CSI, right? On TV. They're always digging through the trash. Yeah. Okay. So speaking of TV, what's the last series that you binge watched? Do you binge watch TV?
Yes, I love television. You on Netflix is one of my favorite shows. It's very crime thriller, perfect for the Halloween season. It's a very good show.
What's it called? I missed that.
You.
Okay.
Just YOUU. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So so it sounds like you like crime, and is there a genre that kind of you know that, because I know on Netflix they start telling me, oh, we think you'll like this, and all of a sudden they're telling me, is there a genre that you tend to like more than others?
I kind of run the gamut. I love reality TV. I love crime and thrillers. I love comedy. All of it, honestly, is really great for me.
Do you think TV shows do a good job of kind of talking about sustainability? I see once in a while it comes up, but not all the time.
I think I think it's getting better, and it's becoming more, because I think that younger generations, millennials and Gen Z in particular, just naturally talk about climate change a lot. And so in a lot of the younger characters, they're just kind of bringing it up naturally. But I wish they did talk about it more. It would be awesome.
So Linda's question just made me think of something. I know that when our daughter went to college back on the East Coast, and this is now granted getting close to 10 years ago, maybe it is 10 years ago, the people there were like, you do what? I mean, they couldn't believe the level of recycling. Kelly had to take a picture when she was here, when she was in Central Market, and show them. They couldn't believe it. Is there a huge difference still to this day between West Coast versus Midwest versus South versus East Coast when it comes to levels of recycling? Is that still an issue?
Absolutely. So I'm originally from the Midwest. I'm from Michigan, and I went to college there. And I visited Seattle before moving here, and I saw compost bins just like around. And I was like, what are they everywhere? There's compost everywhere. I was taking pictures. I was so excited because we had to go to one specific drop spot if we had it at all. And so that's just where I grew up. And I have people or clients that I've worked with in the South where they don't recycle glass anymore because it's too expensive to transport. And so there's stuff all over the country where it's so inconsistent that we are so lucky in the Pacific Northwest to have all the resources that we have available to us.
What do we need to do to get our compatriots across the rest of the other areas to come along on this ride with us?
I think it goes back to your earlier question about governments and policy, that it's just funding the things that will help move us towards this, having the political movements for this, but also building culture from the ground up. And so I'm focused in the Pacific Northwest because I live here, but I also try to reach people from all over the world who are interested in this topic, because everyone kind of needs to grow with this movement. So I hope to see it in my lifetime grow and expand to more than what we have here.
Hey, before Linda goes, I can't believe we're through 40 minutes already. It's unbelievable. And we really appreciate you being here. Before we leave, though, are there any resources, books, podcasts, video series, documentaries? If somebody says, I'd really like to learn more, either for my business or for myself, what books or other resources might you recommend?
Well, I will plug a guide that I created on my website, and it's bluedaisy.com/free-guide. And it's just an introduction to what does it mean to be a zero waste business. I break it down to 5 steps. So if you have no clue what I'm talking about when I talk about zero waste, that's where you can start. And then something that I haven't seen yet, but is on my list for this weekend, is a documentary on Netflix called Gather. And it's really, it connects the more indigenous perspective of climate change and the climate crisis to kind of bring together what we've talked about today, but also have a different perspective on it. So I'd say those 2 things are a good beginner's place to start.
Great. Wow. So there's just so much out there in terms of, so that's great around that. But in terms of just books in general, something that you recommend that you think that might be useful for us?
I'm not sure I have it on the top of my list. I'm reading a really great book right now called The Fifth Beginning. It's about archaeology, and it really ties in deeply with waste, because if we study the past, we can kind of predict or interpolate the future. And so that's been really interesting to kind of think about what I do in a kind of archaeological type of perspective. So that's what I'm reading right now.
Do you think like 500 or 5,000 years from now, anthropologists going to dig up like plastic bags and wonder what our civilization was?
There's actually an exhibit in the Burke Museum of Natural History where they have cutouts of landfills throughout time. And they have one from like 100 years ago, 50 years ago, and then the present, I believe. And I cannot imagine how different it'll be in 100 years from now.
So for listeners that want to get in touch with you or learn more about your company, how can they get more information? Where should they go?
Yeah, you can search Blue Daisi Consulting on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and my website is bluedaisy.com. And if you want to follow me personally, I'm on Instagram at hippiemoji.
Yeah, I want you to spell Blue Daisi, because it's not the way that we might think.
Yeah, so Daisy is spelled with an I. It's actually a play on my middle name. So it's DAISI.
So it's BLUEDAISI.com.
Correct. Yep.
Got it. Okay. So while you're doing that, while you're checking out her website, make sure you check out all the replays on shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle, and wherever you get your podcast, whether it's iHeart, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, because we are, Dan,
we are ubiquitous.
Right? Okay. And also follow us on our show's social media pages on YouTube, Facebook, and of course, Instagram.
Well, first of all, Moji, thank you for being here. As Linda said, we enjoyed having you. Linda, as always, thank you very much. Everybody, jump on our Facebook page and follow us, because that's where we're doing live streams just like this. We also have an Instagram for Seattle Shrimp Tank Podcast. So we're all over the social media pages. Please rate and review us. If you're going to do it, give us a 5. Why don't you? But thanks for doing that. Our next show, which will be live streaming next Wednesday, November 10th at noon, our guest will be Dane Kuhlman of Victory Media out of Spokane. I think he's our first Spokane guest that we've had. And my co-host for that week will be James Alberson. So everybody listen, in the meantime, be safe, be well, be prosperous, and please recycle and use things multiple times. Why don't you? Because until next week, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp